Hello, everybody. I'm Clare Beresford, your host and the CEO of Laurence Simons, and I'm delighted to welcome you to our latest episode of Summing Up, the Legal Podcast. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, we provide fresh insight to help leaders in the legal industry prepare for and navigate the rapidly changing and evolving business landscape. Today, I'm joined by Christian Matton, Chief Legal Officer at IBA, a world-leading innovator in the emerging space of particle accelerator technology. IBA is using particle accelerator technology to diagnose and treat cancer and other serious illnesses. Christian has had a leading role in the pharmaceutical industry for nearly 2 decades, formerly leading Nestlé Skin Health as their corporate general counsel. During his tenure at Nestlé Skin Health, he introduced a legal matrix organization, which entailed delegating each attorney a level of responsibility out of the following: territorial, business unit, and legal expertise. And as a consequence of this work, he was nominated to the GC Power List 2015 Switzerland. Earlier in his career, Christian was general counsel for Eidetica Biopharma activities, managing their legal and intellectual property strategy. He also served as Vice President, Legal and Intellectual Property at Fujirebio and General Counsel Pharma and Vice President of Europe, Middle East, Africa and Asia at UBC. Christian, that is a very impressive career path. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're thrilled to have you here. So if I may, I'd like to start right at the beginning, really. One of the things that we always ask is that thread, because everyone has a thread that's led them to where they are today. So where was home for you growing up, Christian?
Well, first, thank you. Thank you for the invitation. It's really very kind of you. And the long list of achievements and career path makes me feel very old. So it's a bit scary in a way. But anyway, going back to the beginning, when people ask me where you're from, I always must pause a few moments before being able to give the right, correct legal answer. Because technically speaking, I was born on Belgian soil in Germany. My dad served for NATO, and so we were living in a very international community, not too far from Cologne. Our neighbors were Americans, French, Canadians, Italian, and so on and so forth. And so I grew up in a multilingual and very multicultural environment. I still remember, when I saw my first Texas steak as a 5-year-old. Our next door neighbor, I believe Jack was his name, was from Texas. And so we had every now and then a barbecue, like they do in Texas. Huge T-bone steaks and hand-cut ribeyes. And you can imagine the impression that made on a 5-year-old. And still today, I still wonder if I compare my own barbecues to what I saw at that time, will I ever get to that same level? So growing up, it was a very international experience, also in terms of languages, because I'm a native Dutch speaker. But English, French, and German were, languages I spoke very early on and grew up with. So somehow I'm pretty sure that all influenced my later career choices and the way I wanted to live my life.
Interesting. I think one of the gifts that childhood brought to you was that really international experience really early on, and I'm just curious to understand. Was there a particular moment or some memory that was the catalyst for you exploring a career in the law?
Well, that's it's a little bit of a story. My dad, being in the military, he obviously wanted his son to follow his path. That's how military are. But the son had different interests. And as so many of your previous guests, actually, it didn't start with law, but with something else. And I think if I remember well, at the age of 12, I started stargazing. I got soon thereafter my first telescope
Okay.
and started reading books about astronomy, and all the science around it. I was member of a local amateur astronomer association, but you know what bothered me was that it really was like an old man's club. I was the only teenager, and one day I decided I wanted to share my passion for the sky with people of my own age and from all over the world. And so, guess what? I set up the International Youth Amateur Astronomer Association
Amazing.
with headquarters in the village where I lived in Belgium. And 2 years into the adventure, our association counted around 20 members, okay, from 5 different countries. And at the age of 16, I organized our first stargazing camp in Vienna, Austria. And, it was just so great fun. And then, unfortunately, reality caught up with me. Astronomy became too mathematical. And, as many lawyers, science is sometimes at a level where we can't follow anymore, even before we become a lawyer. And so, I had to find something else. And I still wanted this connection to this international, multicultural growing up phase. And so I told my parents I want to become a diplomat. And, a diplomat, very nice. And my parents said, well, you know what? As a diplomat, sorry, you study diplomatic sciences or whatever it's called, and then you're a diplomat. But have you thought about studying law? Because with law, you can also become a diplomat.
Mm-hmm.
And, if that doesn't work out, you can do many other things. And so that's how it started, actually, and how I got to study law.
I think it's going to be interesting for our viewership and people who are listening to this to really understand that there's no one path, right? There's no one path that gets you to a particular place. And I'm just curious, were you? I mean, anybody that's setting up a in the time, if I may suggest, before the internet was available, an international astrological association with members from however many different countries, you clearly had a curiosity or a brain that worked in a certain way. Were you a good student?
Generally, I was a good student, but it's true, some topics were easier than other, and maths was obviously one of the more difficult ones. I loved Latin and Greek, Old Greek, ancient Greek, I studied, so this was fantastic. But then again, in today's world, what do you do with this kind of background? You can't make a real living with it other than being a teacher. So yeah, I was looking for my strengths, and you're right, interests and strengths are not necessarily the same. And you have to discover yourself a little bit. And in a way, it's, trial and error. And if you can do it through your hobbies, then obviously this is really helpful.
Yeah. That educational path though that led you then into a career in law, you've had a mix of both private practice and the in-house legal experience. And obviously, as I mentioned in the introduction, you've moved from being a general counsel of Pharma and Vice President Europe, Middle East, Africa and Asia, General Counsel Pharma and Vice President Europe, Middle East, Africa and Asia at UCB to your role today. Why did you keep with the in-house path? What was it about the in-house path that you thought that was the career for you?
Yeah. To explain that, I have to explain why I made the move from private practice to in-house. And in a way, it was a very natural decision for me. When saying goodbye to university as a young lawyer, one's first thought is to join as a member of the bar. And so I did, without really thinking and making final choices in life. And at first it was fascinating, as it was both broad in scope and at the same time specialized. So I could use my general training to do, for example, divorce cases. And my special law degree in European law, because I had, in addition to my basic law degree, also a degree in European law and European competition law. I could advise on antitrust cases, so really diverse and very interesting in that respect. But a few years into the job, I got frustrated, and really for two very different reasons. One was a moral aspect reason. As a young barrister in Belgium at least, but I guess it's in many countries like that, one had to accept pro bono cases allocated by the state. And these cases were very often very emotionally loaded matters, but sometimes also touching deep moral questions. And one day I had to defend a child abuser. And so I went to the prosecutor's office to study the case evidence, to see what they had against my client. And it was nothing but compelling. I mean, there was no discussion. It was so clear, so straightforward. There was not a single doubt of guilt possible. I then went to visit my client in prison, and I confronted him with the facts and the evidence. And I was very surprised and shocked that he continued to uphold his innocence. And I told him, listen, I'm happy to defend you and to ensure that your rights of due process are fully respected and you get an appropriate and fair judgment, but don't lie to me. I mean, don't do these kind of things, not in these kind of matters. And he stuck to his position. And then I went to see the president of the bar, and I told him, listen, from a moral point of view, I cannot do this. And I asked him to release me from the case on moral grounds, because I really couldn't cope with the battle between justice and lying and manipulating. So that was something that, from a personal point of view, I really didn't like. The second source of frustration was a very different one, but as important as the first one. It was, I worked for a law firm, a boutique law firm in Brussels, and you spend these long hours drafting these opinions, until after midnight. Then you've looked at all the angles, looked at all the possible solutions, you give a recommendation, you push the send button, and then it's gone. And my biggest frustration was, in a lot of cases, you don't hear back from the external client. You did all this work, and you would hope for some feedback, or at least know what did the external client do with your opinion? Did they use it? How did they implement it, if at all? And so for me, this was a big frustration. And I wanted to know what happened with my advice, what decisions were made on the basis of that document. And so one day, it was more of a coincidence, I got an offer to move in-house as junior legal counsel. And I grabbed the opportunity with both hands. And I was lucky enough that, my first in-house role was in the pharma industry. And not only did I get closer to the corporate decision makers and was thus able to better understand and influence them to take the right decisions, but working in and for the life sciences industry,
Yeah.
and you see this throughout my career, I've really stuck to that industry.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, it gave me an additional boost and purpose. And what can be more satisfying than coming home in the evening and thinking you did something good for patients? That's really something on top of your pure legal work. And so if you ask me, what inspired me to stay in the life sciences industry for almost 30 years, well, it's this: the mission of ultimately serving the patient and the everyday legal challenges of a hugely, hugely regulated environment, as you know. So that's what made me change from private practice to in-house and stay in-house for so many years.
One of the things that we always like to do on this podcast, Christian, is to help some of our listeners who are at an earlier stage in their career, who are perhaps, trying to navigate some of those career paths. And so we always ask our people who are participating, who are senior leaders in the legal industry, if there's any advice that they were given, or if there's any advice that they would like to share. So my question really is twofold. Was there any advice that you received in your career journey? And equally, is there any advice that you would like to share to a young person who would like to take a leadership position at some point in the career? What are the steps that you need to do to get that? So first one is, did you receive any advice at all?
Yeah, a lot of advice. IBA is the sixth company I'm working for in my career, I believe. But I still remember the very first in-house opportunity I had at UCB. My boss at the time, she was, I have a lot of admiration for her. She's the greatest lawyer I've ever met, actually. And she was very cross with me at the beginning of my stay at UCB, because I was giving this legal advice, drafting these contracts, and then she said, "Yeah, but do you know what it is about? Do you know what products we're talking about? Do you understand this therapy? How close are you to the therapy, to the patient?" And it's something she hammered on all the time. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but stop being a lawyer and start understanding the product, the company, the services, and the ultimate mission of the company. And that is indeed really something very important, especially as a young lawyer, because you just come out of university. The only thing you want to do is practice law in the best possible way.
Mm-hmm.
And then you forget that, well, law without the real world is nothing. And so you have to understand and be passionate about the real world. So that's the advice I really took to heart. It took a while, but ultimately, well, I'm still in the life sciences industry, so it probably proves that I got the message. But the advice I would give to young lawyers is pretty simple, actually. Follow your passion. Never look at the law as just another job. And passion can mean a lot of things. In-house versus practice, private practice, or the judiciary. I mean, it doesn't have to be in-house. There's so many things outside. Or even challenges outside of the legal world.
Mm-hmm.
It's not because you have an education as a lawyer that you have to be a lawyer. There's so many things you can do with law without being a lawyer. And so for me, the primary objective is really follow your passion. And I would say in that respect, never change. I mean, in order to find your passion, you have to be open to change.
Right.
And that's very important too. And never reject change, but embrace it as a window to new opportunities ahead. I think that's really, really crucial. And Claire, you used the word leadership position. To become a leader. If you allow me to give a bit more color in the context of my
Please.
career
Yeah.
development, leader doesn't necessarily equal general counsel or CLO or being listed in the top 500 lawyers or heading a team of 50 plus lawyers. One can be a leader as GC or CLO, of course, and one can be a leader in managing 38 lawyers like I did at Nestle, but one can also be a leader in excelling in a field of law, in being an expert in this field, or in being a thought leader. But the real leader in legal in-house roles is the one who has gained, for me, has gained the full trust of the internal client. The GC from his CEO, the BU lawyer from his business unit president, and so on and so forth. For me, being a true leader in our profession, in the in-house industry, really means being a person of trust, a real counsel in the original meaning of the word, be it as legal counsel or as general counsel. So counseling for me is really at the heart of our mission. And so when we talk about becoming a leader, well, then this is what I mean with it.
Thank you for that. Thank you. That will be helpful to many, many people. And you mentioned earlier, Christian, about one of the things that moved you from private practice into in-house, and specifically sort of within that pharmaceutical, healthcare industry, life sciences, is that ability that you've come home at the end of the day and you know that you've done some good in the world, right? You've moved things forward. And you also then spoke about passion, right? About the passion that you have in yourself, finding something that fulfills you. You've got a very impressive track record within the life sciences world. Is it the combination of those two things that attracted you to it? You know, what is it about this sector that has meant that you've stayed in that path throughout your career?
So yes, it's the nature of the business: life sciences, pharmaceutical, consumer health, medical device. I've been a bit everywhere. Innovative medicines, generic medicines, biotech. So it's a fascinating world. But the other aspect, and it's you cannot de-link it from that, is the international aspect of it. Life sciences is by definition international, and for me, as I explained in the beginning, if you grow up in an international environment, then you will continue to look for that throughout your career, and I'm not sure you can find it in all industries, but you can certainly find it in the life sciences industry. And so for me, that was a critical reason for moving in-house. I worked for European companies, as I said, but also for US corporations, having their international headquarters in Europe. As you know, I worked 10 years out of Switzerland, fascinating country. But the challenge of managing, legal projects for international companies is obviously huge. And beyond your technical expertise, you need this ability to connect internationally, and to organize your work internationally. And if you do that, you have to be open to other cultures. And so that's an important element as well. For me, a good lawyer needs a couple of important soft skills, especially in the international sphere, I would say. A successful lawyer in an international environment knows when to listen and when to talk. Listening to your clients, to the partner on the other side, and guiding them to a solution is really, really important. And then especially in these international environments, and the international projects involving people from different cultures and backgrounds, always keep a humble posture, an open mind, and a continuous hunger for trying to understand the other party, because understanding is winning on both sides. And I think that's really crucial, especially in international transactions and projects.
That leads me to my next question, which is, and keeping on this sort of international theme and some of the things that you've spoken about and highlighted there. You've worked extensively on international ventures throughout your career, and you've also had these large-scale projects which are spanning multiple and often very different jurisdictions. How do you manage those from a legal and compliance perspective?
Yeah, so I'm a Belgian law qualified lawyer, so not a Chinese law or any other country. So it's a big challenge. An attorney in a law firm, by definition, deals with cases that are within his jurisdiction, within his legal qualification. In-house is a bit more difficult, of course, because on top of your basic legal education, which, if you come from a country like Belgium, I would say I use maybe in 10% of my job, I use Belgian law, and 90% is anything else.
Yeah.
And so I can't be qualified in 170 jurisdictions. So the art is to recognize, to acknowledge that there are common principles in whatever country you're dealing with. They're either common law or they're civil law. That covers about 95% of the jurisdictions. Once you got that, then it's already a good start. And then obviously for specific questions, specific challenges on the local law, you need a network of law firms that you can trust, that you can that know your company. And I think bringing the two together, that helps really managing such complex projects.
So talking of complexity, you, during your time at Nestlé Skin, you introduced a legal matrix. I'd like to explore that a little bit, if I may, to sort of, if you could explain to us a little bit more about what that looks like, what was involved in setting that up. I think it's really helpful for, you were ahead of your time. This was a few years ago now. Would you be able to share your experience of that, please?
Yeah. So I think since very early on in my career, even before Nestlé, I've been a great believer of integrating the legal function into the business. The closer the lawyer is to the business, the better he will understand the products, services, technology, or whatever the activity of the business is. We talked about that. And the better he will be able to tweak his advice to the needs of the business. But this approach also comes with a risk. One doesn't want his lawyers to become the yes men or yes women of the business partner in the company. It may lead to, well, not providing the best possible legal advice for a given situation, or worse, one's may see, one's integrity damaged. And as I think one of your previous guests in this series said once, one can only lose one's integrity once, because trying to get it back is almost impossible. I forgot who it was. But
McMullen.
striking.
Yeah.
And so, and that brings me back to leadership qualities, and being a person of trust. And with the Matrix organization, which actually included a direct reporting to the business, and what we call dotted lines to the function. I think we got as close as possible, as close as one can get to a symbiosis of business and legal functions. And as I said, you have to find or watch out for the pitfalls of integrity and losing efficiency of your advice. But from my experience, I've seen that most lawyers are very happy with such an approach.
I'd like to change gears a little bit, if I may, which is to kind of bring us right back up to sort of the present day. And in your current organisation, IBA Worldwide, you hold B Corp certification. And just as an aside, we're also at Laurence Simons, on that path and starting that process. So how important are sustainability goals to you? And the harder part, how do we ensure that they're upheld?
Yeah. So, Claire, when I returned from my 10-year journey in Switzerland, and at that point, I had over 20 years of legal career in small organizations, multinational startups, name it. I thought I had seen it all. And then I joined IBA as their CLO. And guess what? A new uncharted territory opened its frontiers to me. It was literally like this. I was flabbergasted with what I saw. You explained what IBA does. Huh? So we develop these huge medical devices. They're probably the largest medical device in the world in size. Because actually you need to build a hospital next to the existing hospital to house the medical device. So it's huge. And it's also a huge project. But at IBA, we believe that because we run this special business of treating cancer and helping patients and doctors in getting rid of this ugly disease, we believe that as a company we have a special responsibility. And we have given the word sustainability because it's a word, that's often too easily used and without a lot of tangible meaning. But we wanted to give sustainability a tangible content through what we see as our compass, which is the stakeholder approach. And it means that everything the company does must be to the benefit of its stakeholders. And in no particular order or ranking, these are the patients and customers, our employees, the shareholders, the society in which we operate, and our planet as a whole. So they're all at equal level. And this is, not just words. And that's when we come to B Corp. We've been looking for, having this mission, we've been looking for companies with similar approaches and philosophies. And then we ended at the doorstep of B Corp. And B Corp, as you know, is short for Benefit Corporation. It's a movement of companies taking on the challenge of transforming the global economy to the benefit of all people, communities, and the planet. That's how they post it on their website, and it's truly like that. The network, because it's not an organization, it's really a network, counts over 7,000 companies today. And they all went through a transformation process, making the business a force for good. And so when I joined, just after I joined, actually, so I really joined at the right moment. IBA decided to walk that path of transformation with the help of B-Lab, which is the organization that certifies you and accompanies you along this path. And we dedicated substantial resources and people to the project: environmental control, mobility, supply chain, ethics, governance, social well-being, a lot of aspects which are all covered by the term sustainability. So we made this analysis, we started this transformation. And, the role of a lawyer in this whole process is really not to be underestimated. It is very important, and it's very important, at least in one aspect, which is the governance structures of the company. We had to adapt them to ensure that the stakeholder approach became embedded in the day-to-day governance. And just to give you a taste of what we've done on the legal front, we changed the mission and the objectives of the company in the Articles of Association. So it's really like the constitution of the company. We changed it to make sure that the stakeholder approach is embedded in there as the basic mission. And it's not an easy process, but at least on the Belgian law, this change of the Articles of Association requires an 80% majority vote. So it's not 50% plus one, but 80% of all shareholders. And, one would think that in a stock-listed company like we're listed on Euronext, with numerous financial investors, this would be an impossible job. Well, we did it, and we convinced 80% of all these shareholders that it is a good thing. And actually, we achieved 98% for this specific change. So this was just fantastic. But in itself, it's not sufficient, because having it embedded in your mission is one thing. But then we also changed, the article in the bylaws that talks about the board of directors and how they decide. And so there too, we included an obligation for the board of directors to take into account all stakeholders at the same level in every strategic decision they take. And so this is fantastic. And I mean, as a lawyer, it's so nice to see this, because if you can make this, give tangible content to the word sustainability, it's fantastic. And I believe in general that sustainability in all its aspects, not just environmental, but also social, governance, is really becoming more important, and that nowadays lawyers really need to be on top of it. There's so many legislation that's coming. There's the CSRD, Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. There's the ESG reporting. There's more and more coming. There's a Sustainability Due Diligence Directive at the European level that's coming. So it's really important that as a lawyer you stay aware of this, and that how to help your client, your organization in being compliant with this. Because I really believe, in 20 years from now, companies that do not meet sustainability standards, they will be out. They will be out. So it will be so important that if you don't play the game, if you don't implement this, if as a lawyer you don't help your company to achieve these goals, then it may well be the end of the company.
That's quite a statement, and I think it's absolutely true. I mean, what we know from the younger people who'll be listening to this, they're very purpose driven. They're very purpose led. They're looking for something else in terms of the organisations that they join. So, well done to IBA Worldwide for doing that. I'd like to change gears a little bit, if I may, and just talk a little bit more around that sort of leadership piece, because there's been a huge part of your career that has been about leading and managing successful teams. What is your leadership style?
Well, obviously it has evolved over time. In 30 years, you learn also as a manager. And I think managing teams successfully is a learning process. I would say, especially for legal teams, I don't have to tell you what the stereotype of the typical lawyer is, an individualist preferring to work in his corner without too much involvement of others. I'm exaggerating, but a lot of business people think of us like that. Now, to get rid of this image as early on in the process as possible, I have two simultaneous approaches. One is what I would call the law firm approach, which means that lawyers in the team are treated as partners in a law firm. Each partner has his own set of clients, and in-house it can be a business unit, can be an operational division, can be an enabling function, and so on and so forth. And that lawyer is the point to go to for all matters regarding that BU or function. And this approach ensures that your team member feels empowered because he has got responsibility, real responsibility, and is also accountable and held accountable for the legal service to that client group. I think this is important for lawyers because traditionally, the legal function doesn't offer a lot of promotion opportunities. Mm-hmm. You're either legal counsel, with some levels of junior to senior, or your general counsel, and that's about it. That's your legal in-house career. So one has to offer meaningful content and responsibility within the job scope, and I think by implementing this approach, it can really help motivate your lawyers. And then the second, in parallel to this law firm management style, I have, as part of a company-wide and IBA-wide effort, integrated the concept of collective intelligence. And collective intelligence basically means that one manages an organization in such a way that the decisions affecting the company are of a higher quality when taken by a group of people rather than taken by individuals. And so collective intelligence is the ability of groups through the social dimension to achieve unity of purpose, action and thought, and thus get better results, because that's the ultimate goal, obviously. Yeah. So about 2 years ago, IBA started a project whereby it wished to evolve from a hierarchical X organization, as they call it, to a collaborative Y organization. So we reorganized the way we were having meetings, avoid meeting rooms with tables, no laptops, no phones, distribute roles for each meeting, agree on the rules of each meeting, agree on the agenda. We got rid of symbols of power, which are very typical for a hierarchical organization. So no more titles used, no closed offices, not even for the CEO, no privileges whatsoever. And then we started delegating decisions to groups. And at first we experimented with non-strategic matters, for example, the onboarding process of new employees. And rather than HR driving that process, we asked the whole organization, 2,000 employees, take care of it, basically. And so we asked volunteers to organize this in their way without any instruction. And so they took on that challenge. Management didn't intervene in any way. And the decision on how to do it was ultimately a group's decision. And it worked quite well, actually. And so we went on experimenting after this one, to organizing offsite meetings, sustainability initiatives on a smaller scale, sales meetings and so on. And finally, earlier this year, we decided to take the experiment to strategic projects level. And so we challenged all 2,000 employees to help the CEO in answering two questions. One, what would be an acceptable net profit rate for the company? So you ask all your employees, what do you think? Is it 10%? Is it 20%? What, profit margin should we achieve? But it's not all. Also, once you've defined this, what will you do to achieve this profit rate as defined, both through cost initiatives and growth initiatives? And so after, I think now 6 months into the project, we have 35 initiatives that are ongoing, different groups, volunteers, their own decision structures, their own rules. And the only thing we've asked is by the end of the year, we would like to see tangible results, which means, euro figures. What have you come up with? And so, the jury is still out there, as they say, because at the end of the year, we'll see what we really have achieved. But it is a very, very interesting, how should I say it, project. Now, that's the organization. Also in the legal team, as I said, next to the law firm approach, I have also implemented this collective intelligence management style within the legal team, and I think with great success. And I'll just give you two examples. We just returned last Friday from our annual offsite meeting, and this year it was in the US. About 5 months ago, I asked the team to organize the offsite, and the only direction I gave was, it has to contain 3 elements, some business-related discussions, some legal education time, and of course some time for team building. And there were no budget restrictions, no other limitations in duration, format, or whatever. So the group, the team itself had to organize it. And I must say, so we returned last Friday. It was a great success. I was really surprised with the outcome. It was, I should say, it was almost much better than when I organized it the year before. And then the other example I have in mind is, we're a small team. We're 7. to cover worldwide legal support for 4 business units, which is quite a challenge. And the challenge increases, of course, when people are absent. They go on holiday, they're ill, and so on. And, all when their workload peaks. So I've initiated a backup support project for the team. And in many teams, what one sees is that the manager organizes one-to-one meetings with each of its team members and the team itself, and then distributes, reroutes work just to make sure that everything works out fine. And so what we've done in our group is, rather than doing this, I do have one-on-ones with my team members, and we do have a team meeting. But in addition to this, they have come up with one-on-one meetings between themselves, and with as a sole purpose to, regulate the workflow and help each other, helping out with understanding problems, having a second opinion on certain things, and helping out in terms of workload. And again, it's a pretty recent initiative there too. The jury is still out, but so far the results are very promising. So yes, I think management style, law firm approach, and collective intelligence, it's a nice combination.
Yeah, that's fascinating, Christian. I think it's fascinating to, what you're describing there is how you're getting the best outcome and performance from your team using these, the collective intelligence. And that, from a company perspective, was fascinating. What you explained. It's what I always find interesting is if you empower. You're talking about the empowerment of your team and the empowerment of the organization to deliver their best selves, to deliver their best work. So that again is great leadership. It's great leadership to be able to, understand that how you guide and steer your team. So yeah, I would have liked to have come on your offsite in America and been a fly on the wall. I'm sure that was fascinating.
Maybe next time.
maybe. Equally, one topic that comes up in terms of leadership, and it's come up very regularly in our summing up episodes, is the concept, the idea, the theme of resilience, and that being a key ingredient to success. How has resilience helped you in your career?
Yeah, so resilience, I've a little bit, at the point where I'm now, after the collective intelligence experience with IBA, I have a bit of mixed feelings with the word resilience.
Okay.
Because obviously it shows courage, or it's synonym of courage, motivation, and to move forward towards reaching your objectives. But I somehow, in the context of collective intelligence, I find it has, or it may have, some negative connotation. Because if resilience means using energy to fight opposite forces, to continue to be motivated to at all cost achieve your goals, then in a way resilience is almost a waste of energy. It's almost something regrettable in a context of collective intelligence, because in collective intelligence you expect the group to be intelligent, and so your interactions with the group do not, or would not, require you to be resilient in the traditional meaning of the word. You need to be passionate, you need to be motivated, you need to be courageous, but do you need to be resilient in the context of collective intelligence? I would need to think a bit more about that. you see. But if you take the positive aspects of resilience, then obviously this is a fantastic characteristic. And before IBA, yes, I had to show resilience in the more traditional meaning of the word, and but there too, I think my main driver was passion. Because if you're not passionate about something, then at some point you will give up, or you will divert to something else. Not necessarily a passion, but just something else because you don't find the courage to continue. So I think passion is the key word here for resilience. It's really important. And in a context of collective intelligence, you should need a bit less of that.
That is one of the most interesting answers I have ever heard around the word of resilience. And thank you for that. That was, illuminating. And I also think at the end, when you were giving a little bit of career advice, really, in terms of how you can think about that word, and if you translate it or transpose it to passion, that's really good advice for anybody to have. Thank you. That is. I've got a lot to think about within that collective intelligence space. Now, not that in any way your career is over, Christian, and not in any way that I am, wanting to have you share anything that you're not comfortable sharing. But what's next for you? Are there any projects that you're currently undertaking that you can share with our audience? What's in the pipeline? Is there anything exciting that your team or you are doing at IBA Worldwide?
Yeah, as I said, well, IBA is really an eye-opener, has been an eye-opener for me when I joined 5 years ago already. Time flies. Because it's so, I can't find the word, but there's always something new. And actually, I'm now working. It's not a secret. Actually, there's been a lot of press releases around this already. IBA is currently opening what I would say the next chapter in its revolutionary cancer treatment adventure. We have entered into a joint venture with Belgium's Nuclear Research Institute, which is really world famous, to produce a radioisotope called actinium-225. And I know it sounds complicated, but I'll explain just briefly what it is. But by joining forces, this joint venture, it's called Pantera, will produce actinium-225, which in combination with an antibody target molecule can efficiently kill cancer cells at a very localized level in the body with much less side effects than today. And it's a very promising therapy in the sense that also metastasis, for certain cancer types will be able to be treated with this method. And that's really revolutionary because, the big next hurdle in cancer treatment is really metastasis. How do we treat a cancer which is already spread throughout the body? And that's really the biggest challenge. And maybe with this treatment, we'll get a step closer to this. So, again, referring to what motivates you every day to do your job, well, this is yet another very easy example. It's fun, it's challenging, but it's so satisfying also to do these kind of projects.
You took the words right out of my mouth, because I was about to say that's a full circle moment to bring us back to the beginning where you're saying, why did you stay on this career path? That is, well, look, I am crossing fingers, holding thumbs, to use it in all languages, that this goes well for everybody, because the world will benefit from that. If that allows us to move forward on a global basis, that's extraordinary. Thank you so much for sharing that. We always finish our podcast in the same way, with the same question, which is a very simple one. What's the one thing you can't live without?
Yeah, well, other than the obvious one, which is my family, of course, my wife, my children, my broader family, I would say, and you will smile, it would be a glass of Brunello di Montalcino red wine and a wonderful sunset view, not needing any words. So
Va bene. That's perfect.
yeah.
Christian, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure speaking with you today.
Well, the pleasure is all mine. And again, thank you so much for having me.